The Antarctic Ocean. Objectives. After attending this lesson, the user would be able to understand the importance of the Antarctic Ocean, its geographic setting, geological conditions, its biodiversity, and the natural resources. The reasons for protecting the Antarctic as an international zone of scientific research will also be known. The unique conditions of this fourth oceanic landmass will always be an interesting topic of study to the students of oceanography. Introduction. The Earth is called as a blue planet mainly due to the presence of the bluish oceanic water masses. There are two white-colored zones around the poles, denoting the presence of ice-covered seas and continents. One is the Arctic Ocean around the North Pole, and the other one is the Antarctic Ocean around the South Pole. The fourth major oceanic mass of the Earth is the Antarctic Ocean. It is a major oceanic landmass covered with continental ice sheets. It is one of the coldest regions in the world. The Antarctic is slightly colder than the Arctic region. Many geographers say that these waters do not form a separate ocean at all. They also advocate that the Antarctic is an extension of the southern parts of the other oceans like the Atlantic, Indian, and the Pacific. The Antarctic is also referred to as the Southern Ocean. The Southern Ocean refers to a ring of oceans that circles Antarctica. In this lesson, the geological, geographic, and oceanographic details of the Antarctic Ocean are highlighted. The geographic setting. The Antarctica is centered asymmetrically around the South Pole. It is the southernmost continent in the world. The 66 degree 34 minutes south latitude forms the outermost boundary of the Antarctic Circle. It includes parts of the Southern Ocean, surrounding seas, ice shelves, continental glaciers, plateaus, and mountain ranges. The Antarctica is the coldest, driest, and windiest continent, possessing many unique features to learn. Dimension. The Antarctic covers more than 14 million square kilometers, making it as the fifth largest continent in the world. The coastline measures a length of about 17,968 kilometers. The nearest continents to the Antarctic are the South America, New Zealand, Australia, and Africa. The shortest distance lies between Cape Horn of South America and the Palmer Peninsula of the Antarctic. The Antarctic Peninsula is a mountainous S-shaped finger of land that points toward South America. In fact, this peninsula forms a continuation of the Andes mountain chains of South America. Ice-covered land. About 98% of the Antarctica is covered by ice, which averages at least 1.6 kilometers in thickness. The name Antarctica is a Greek word. It bears a feminine meaning as opposite to the north. It is almost like anti-Arctic or opposite to Arctic. About 98% of Antarctica is covered by only ice sheet, averaging at least 1.6 kilometers in thickness. The continent has about 90% of the world's total ice. It contains about 70% of the world's freshwater resource. If all of this ice were melted, the global sea levels would rise to about 60 meters. Two major regions. The Antarctic landmass has a stretch of mountains called as Transantarctic Mountains. This divides the Antarctica into two regions. The portion west of this range is called as West Antarctica, and east of it is called as East Antarctica. Both the regions have a lot of mountains, peaks, valleys, land provinces, massifs, ice shelves, plateaus, coasts, bays and seas. The East Antarctica. The East Antarctica lies on the Indian Ocean side of the Transantarctic Mountains. It comprises the Coates Land, the Dronning Maud Land, the Enderby Land, the Mac Robertson Land, Princess Elizabeth Land, Queen Mary Land, the Wilkes Land, the Terry Addy Land, the George Land, the Oates Land, and the Victoria Land. The East Antarctica faces the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. It covers more than half the continent. Mountains, valleys, and glaciers mark the coast of East Antarctica. The central part of the East Antarctica is a plateau raising up to 3,000 meters above sea level. The Western Antarctica. The Western Antarctica lies nearer to the South American continent. It comprises of the Ross Ice Shelf, the Mary Bird Land, the Ellsworth Land, the Palmer Land, the Ron Ice Shelf, the Fitchner Ice Shelf, and the Graham Land. The West Antarctica borders the Pacific Ocean. Prominent mountains of the Antarctic. The prominent mountains of the Antarctic are the Ellsworth Mountains, the Sipple Mountains, the Mount Sidley, the Mount Nansen, the Mount Elster, the Mount Markham, Mount Kishpatrick, and the Mount Bar Smith. The South Polar Plateau is located around the South Pole. The West Antarctica includes several other mountain ranges and volcanoes. The Vinson Massif, the highest point in Antarctica at 5,140 meters, stands in the Ellsworth Mountains near the peninsula. Mount Erebus, Antarctica's most active volcano, lies on the island. It rises up to 3,794 meters. Rivers of the Antarctic. Most of the rivers and small streams of the Antarctic are generated due to melting of the ice fields. The glacial melt of the mountainous peaks are responsible for the surface flows in the streams and creeks. The notable streams are Adams Stream, Alf River, Onyx River, Prisco Stream, and Surco Stream. Prisco Stream is the longest one, extending up to 3.8 kilometers. The notable creeks are Aiken Creek, Lawson Creek, and Rezovsky Creek. The length of the creeks range from 0.5 kilometers to more than 1.5 kilometers. Seas and bays. The seas of the Antarctic are the Weddell Sea, the Indian Ocean, the Ross Sea, and the Bellingshausen Sea. There are some notable bays existing around the Antarctic. They are the Amundsen Bay, the Edward VIII Bay, the Mackenzie Bay, the Far Bay, the Windsurnes Bay, the Kainan Bay, the Sulzberger Bay, the Pine Island Bay, the Marguerite Bay, the Hope Bay, and the Lutzow-Home Bay. Land of ice. As per the geological records, it was found that the Antarctica was an ice-free continent many millions of years ago. Scientists have found fossils of trees and of dinosaurs and small mammals that once lived in this landmass. Glaciers began to form around the South Pole about 38 million years ago. They grew rapidly about 13 million years ago and formed a very thick layer of ice and snow, known as the Antarctic ice cap. The ice cap has buried almost all of Antarctica for the last 5 million years. The ice cap is up to 4,800 meters thick. At its highest points, over mountain ranges, the ice cap rises as high as 4,100 meters above sea level. Ice sheets. Today, the Antarctic ice cap forms the largest body of fresh water in the world. Its volume of 30 million cubic kilometers represents the world's 70% of freshwater resources. The weight of the ice cap causes the ice to spread outward and slide toward the coasts. Ice near the coasts moves as much as 200 meters a year. In some areas, the ice cap breaks and forms crevices or cracks that are more than 30 meters deep. The thickness of Antarctic ice is almost 1.6 kilometers. The average rate of thickening of ice is 0.9 centimeters per year. These are distributed as ice sheets, ice shelves, ice rises, and glaciers. Islands. There are numerous islands around the Antarctic. The notable ones are Baleine Island, Scott Island, Thurston Island, Peter I Island, Charcot Island, Adelaide Island, Biscoe Island, South Shetland Island, King George Island, Elephant Island, South Orkney Island, Coronation Island, Joinville Island, James Ross Island, Hearst Island, Alexander Island, and Berkner Island. Coasts of Antarctica. Two large gulfs cut into Antarctica at opposite ends of the Transantarctic Mountains, the Ross Sea and the Weddell Sea. Smaller bays indent the coastline. The notable coasts of Antarctica are Princess Martha Coast, Princess Astrid Coast, Princess Regnhild Coast, Prince Olav Coast, Kemp Coast, Mac Robertson Coast, Wilhelm Coast, Queen Mary Coast, Knox Coast, Bud Coast, Sabrina Coast, Banzer Coast, George Coast, Hobbs Coast, Walgreen Coast, Yates Coast, Robert English Coast, Luitpold Coast, and Caird Coast. Most of the coastlines are ice shelves. Ice shelf. The Ross Ice Shelf is one of the largest ones in the world. It measures about 700 meters thick at the inner edge and about 200 meters thick at the outermost edge. In summer, the outer edges of the ice shelves break away and form flat icebergs. Scientists have measured and studied the Antarctic icebergs. They found that the area covered by icebergs were found to be as huge as 13,000 square kilometers. Each winter, the surface of the Antarctic Ocean freezes into a sheet of ice. In summer, the sheet breaks into pieces called ice floes. Winds and waves push the floes against one another, forming thick masses known as pack ice. Some pack ice piles up in ridges against the shore. In winter, pack ice may extend as far as 1,600 kilometers from the coast inside the ocean. Historical expeditions. Initially, long before Antarctica was discovered, the ancient Greek philosophers believed that a continent exists around the southern end of the earth. In 1772, the English navigator James Cook began his search for this southern continent. It was Captain James Cook who, for the first time, crossed the Antarctic Circle on the 17th of January 1773. He also sailed around the Antarctic in December 1773 and again in January 1774 using his two ships, HMS Resolution and Adventure. James Cook's voyage also revealed many things about the oceanic waters and their marine life, including the seas and whales. Due to this information, many hunters started moving towards the Antarctica continent. They all explored the area in detail. In 1819, a British sealer named William Smith discovered one of the islands called as the South Shetland Islands. First sight of Antarctica. Antarctica was first sighted in the year 1820 by the crews of the ships captained by three individuals. Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen, an Estonian-born captain in the Russian Imperial Navy, was the first person. The second sailor was Edward Bransfield, a captain from the Royal Navy of Ireland. The other scholar was Nathaniel Palmer, an American sealer out of Stonington from Connecticut. The first documented landing on the mainland of Antarctica was made by the American sealer John Davis in the west parts of it on the 7th of February 1821. The other people who did their explorations are James Weddell in 1823, John Biscoe in 1831, Lieutenant Jules Dumont de Urville in 1837, James Clark Ross from 1839 to 1843, Mercator Cooper in 1853, and Robert Falcon Scott in 1902. First inland exploration. The first inland exploration of Antarctica took place between 1901 and 1904. The UK explorer, a captain in the Royal Navy, led a team of explorers and scientists to the Ross Sea. In November, Scott and two other men headed south across the Ross ice shelf, but due to illness, harsh weather, and lack of food, they could not complete it in one direction. Another group moved up a glacier through the Transantarctic Mountains and reached the edge of the icy inland plateau. During another expedition called as the Nimrod Expedition, which was popularly known as South Pole Party in 1907, became the first to climb the Mount Erebus and to reach the South Magnetic Pole. Ernest Shackleton, a member of Scott's team, returned to Antarctica in 1907. Part of his expedition headed for the South Magnetic Pole and reached it in January 1909. The first discoveries. In addition, Shackleton himself and three other members of his expedition made several firsts in Antarctica. They were the first people to traverse the Ross Ice Shelf. They were the first people to traverse the Transantarctic mountain range via the Beardmore Glacier. They were the first people to set their foot on the South Polar Plateau. An expedition led by Norwegian polar explorer Ronald Amundsen from the ship Fram became the first to reach the geographic South Pole on the 14th of December 1911. Later, Scott reached on the 17th January 1912, followed by Byrd by airplane in November 1929. This place was called as Amundsen-Scott Station. Exploration by air. Exploration by air provided a new way to study the entire Antarctica. In 1928, the Australian explorer Sir Hubert Wilkins surveyed the Antarctic Peninsula and nearby islands. It was the first aeroplane voyage over the Antarctic land. Richard Evelyn Byrd led several voyages to the Antarctic by plane in the 1930s and 1940s. He is credited with implementing mechanized land transport on the continent and conducting extensive geological and biological research. The race to trace the South Pole became one of the most famous events not only in the history of Antarctica, but also in the history of human explorations. The Antarctic Plate. The Antarctic landmass belongs to a separate plate called as Antarctic Plate. It is a tectonic plate containing the continent of Antarctica. It is extending outward under the surrounding oceans. Geologic setting. The geological history of Antarctica covers the geological development of the continent through the Proterozoic eon, Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic eras. More than 170 million years ago, Antarctica was part of the supercontinent Gondwana. Over geological time, the Gondwana land broke apart and Antarctica was formed around 35 million years ago. The West Antarctica contains large amounts of sandstones, limestones, and shales were deposited. East Antarctica has shown seafloor invertebrates and trilobites flourished in the tropical seas. Geologically, the West Antarctica closely resembles the Andes of South America. The most common rocks in the West Antarctica are andesite and rhyolite volcanic, formed during the Jurassic period. There is also an evidence of recent volcanic activity. The East Antarctica is geologically very old, dating from the Precambrian, with some rocks formed more than 3 billion years ago. Beacon Supergroup is one of the major geological formations in this continent. The sedimentological and paleontological data point out that the sediments were deposited under a shallow marine depositional environment. Circumpolar Current. The Southern Ocean is facing the effects of some of the strongest winds and largest waves on the planet. It is also a home to the largest current in the world ocean. It is the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. The Circumpolar Current carries between 135 and 145 million cubic meters of water per second from west to east. It runs along a 20,000 kilometer long path around the Antarctica. While the speed of the current is only about 0.5 meters per second at the surface, the great depth 4 kilometers and breadth 100 to 200 kilometers of the current results in a massive transport of water. The flow of the circumpolar current is equivalent to about 150 times the flow of all the world's rivers combined. Climatic conditions. The Antarctica's climate varies from extremely cold, dry conditions on the inland plateau to milder, moister conditions along the coasts. Many people call this plateau as a polar desert. It has only about 5 centimeters of snowfall each year. The average annual precipitation, rain and snow on the coastal areas is about 60 centimeters. The Antarctic winter lasts from May until August. The Antarctic summer lasts from December until February. The July temperatures range from minus 40 degrees centigrade to minus 70 degrees centigrade inland and from minus 15 degrees centigrade to minus 30 degrees centigrade on the peninsula's coast. The January temperatures range from minus 15 degrees centigrade to minus 35 degrees centigrade inland and reach 0 degrees centigrade on the coast. In general, Antarctica is the coldest continent. The northern islands may have summer temperatures of up to 10 degrees centigrade. The icy winds make the Antarctic air feel even colder. The winds that sweep downward from the plateau can average about 70 kilometers per hour. The wind gusts often reach the coast at 190 kilometers per hour. Factors influencing climate. The main factors influencing the climate of Antarctica are the waters of the Southern Ocean, the seasonal variations of sea ice, the ice sheet that covers the continent shelf, and its high altitude and high southern latitude. There are considerable climatological differences between the sea, the coastlines, and the interior. The key points to bear in mind are that Antarctica is extremely cold, dry, and windy, with little precipitation. The windiest continent. Antarctica is also the windiest of the continents. Apart from global wind currents, Antarctica actually creates its own wind systems. Cold, dense air essentially slides from the high interior ice fields towards the lower areas along the coasts. At the edges of the ice plateau, the winds accelerate, thereby lifting and blowing clouds of snow high into the air. The strongest winds are habitually found on the long coastal slopes of the greater Antarctica. Some coastal areas endure almost constant strong winds. Some other areas may be quite calm much of the time. The Antarctic experiences frequent hurricanes. These sudden and unexpected winds are called katabatic or downslope winds. The driest continent. It is very interesting to note that the Antarctica is also the driest continent. By definition, most of the continent here is a desert. There is very little precipitation each year in the interior parts. The vast amounts of ice and snow which make up the polar ice caps have got accumulated over many millions of years. The mean annual accumulation for the entire continent amounts to less than 5 centimeters of water equivalent, which is just slightly more than the rainfall of the Sahara Desert. But some coastal areas, particularly the west side of the Antarctic Peninsula, receive much more precipitation. The Antarctic Circle. It is important to know the significance of the Antarctic Circle and its relation to the hours of daylight. As one travels farther south in the austral summer months, the days get progressively longer. The Antarctic Circle is located at about 66 degrees 33 minutes south. This circle marks the northernmost point at which the sun is visible for 24 hours a day at the summer solstice. It happens on December 21st, when it is at its highest point above the horizon. 4 different poles. There are 4 different poles identified in the Antarctic. They are the Geographic South Pole, the Magnetic South Pole, the Geomagnetic South Pole, and the Pole of Relative Inaccessibility. The South Pole is in fact the geographical South Pole, which is the southernmost end of the Earth's rotational axis. But there are 3 other poles which are of interest to scientists. The Magnetic South Pole. The Magnetic South Pole is where the lines of force of the Earth's magnetic field converge. The position of this pole is constantly moving by some 10 to 20 kilometers per year. It happens due to the variations in the Earth's magnetic field. All the navigation officers sailing in ships in this region have to take into account of this magnetic variation when interpreting their compass readings. The magnetic South Pole, as found in the year 1997, is located off the Adelie Land in the French sector of Antarctica. The Geomagnetic South Pole. The geomagnetic South Pole is the theoretical definition used to rationalize variations in the Earth's magnetic field. It is located at latitude 78 degrees 5 minutes south, longitude 111 degrees east in the Australian sector near the Russian Vostok region. The Pole of Relative Inaccessibility. The pole of relative inaccessibility is the center of the continent as measured by its distance from the coasts. It is located at latitude 82 degrees 6 minutes south and longitude 54 degrees 58 minutes east. It is in the Australian sector. They grow over the northern part of the Antarctic Peninsula. Simpler organisms like algae grow on the snow, in the lakes, and on the ice surrounding the continent. Black, white, and green lichens have been found to be attached to the rocks. These lichens survive by bunching together to conserve water. The animal life of the Antarctic. The animal life of the Antarctic are very wonderful to see. Only a few insects and other tiny animals are found to spend their entire lives on the Antarctic mainland. The continent's largest land animal is a wingless midge, a type of fly no more than 12 millimeters long. Most of the land animals live at the edges of the continent. Very small lice, mites, and ticks live by attaching themselves with the mosses under the fur of seals or on the feathers of the birds. Wildlife. The Antarctic Ocean has abundant wildlife. Krill, a small shrimp-like creature that feeds on the tiny other floating organisms, is the most common animal of the ocean. Many other Antarctic animals depend on the krills for food. It is a protein-rich food for the people. There are squids which are eaten by many other Antarctic animals. About 100 kinds of fishes are found to be existing in the oceanic waters of the Antarctic. These includes Antarctic cod, icefish, and plunderfish. Whales are the frequent visitors. Whales are the frequent visitors of the Antarctic. Several kinds of whales migrate to Antarctica during the summer seasons. The notable varieties are blue whales, fin whales, humpback whales, minke whales, right whales, and sea whales. The blue whale is the largest animal that has ever lived, with its length growing up to 30 meters. Antarctic whales that eat fish and squid include killer whales, southern bottlenose whales, southern four-toothed whales, and sperm whales. It has been observed that the killer whales are found to be hunting the seals, penguins, and smaller whales in the Antarctic. Various kinds of seals. It is also found from exploration reports that various kinds of seals also live in the Antarctica. They spend most of their lives in the Antarctic waters by swimming, diving, and catching food. Most of them nest on the beautiful coasts. The largest seal in the world is the southern elephant seal, which feeds on the squids. Penguins and other birds. Whenever people talk about the Antarctic, everybody remembers the penguins. The penguins are the most beautiful, lovable ones that are most often associated with the Antarctica. These are basically birds, but they cannot fly. Penguins waddle awkwardly on the land surface. They are the most skillful swimmers in the oceanic waters. They fly through the oceanic waters for diving for fish and for other food. There are 6 kinds of penguins, which are native breeds of this continent. Playful Adelie penguins are the most common kind of penguins. They build their nests on the pebbles of the coasts. The tall and quiet penguins are called as the emperor penguins. They are the most spectacular birds on the globe. They grow to about 1.2 meters. The other varieties are chin-strap penguins, gentoo penguins, king penguins, and macaroni penguins. The rockhopper penguins are one variety which nest only on the islands north of Antarctica. It is also reported that more than 40 kinds of flying birds spend their summer seasons in the Antarctica. These birds include albatrosses, prions, and a large group of seabirds known as petrels. Penguin Island. Penguin Island was sighted in January 1820 by a British expedition under Edward Bransfield. It was so named by him because the penguins have occupied the shores of the island. The island is an ice-free island. It is oval in shape, measuring 1.4 kilometers wide by 1.7 kilometers long. The island has been identified as an important bird area, IBA, by BirdLife International. This habitat supports a wide range of seabirds, including a breeding colony of over 600 pairs of southern giant petrels. Mineral resources. The Antarctic is known for its mineral resources. Small copper deposits have been explored in the Antarctic Peninsula. The East Antarctica has shown traces of chromium, gold, iron, lead, manganese, molybdenum, and zinc. The Prince Charles Mountains contain significant deposits of iron ore. Coal beds also lie within the Trans-Antarctic Mountains. It was first recorded near the Beardmore Glacier. It is also reported that the recent scientific drilling tests have revealed the possibility of petroleum reserves in the Ross Sea and the Bransfield Strait of the Antarctic. The most valuable resources of Antarctica lie offshore, namely the oil and natural gas fields found in the Ross Sea in 1973. Exploitation of all mineral resources by signatory states is banned until 2048 by the Protocol on Environmental Protection to the Antarctic Treaty. Scientific knowledge of Antarctica. The scientific knowledge of Antarctica has increased during the last century. Antarctica has no government, although various countries claim sovereignty in certain regions. Its status is regulated by the 1959 Antarctic Treaty and other related agreements, collectively called as the Antarctic Treaty System. The treaty was signed by 12 countries, including the Soviet Union and later Russia, the United Kingdom, Argentina, Chile, Australia, and the United States. Scientific stations on Antarctica. About 12 countries have established more than 50 scientific stations on Antarctica and nearby islands. These countries were Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Chile, France, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, the Soviet Union, the Union of South Africa, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The United States has set up a station at the South Pole, plus 5 coastal stations and 1 other inland station. The researchers concentrate on various aspects including earthquakes, gravity, magnetism, oceans, and solar activity. The meteorologists study the weather conditions and determine the air pressure, humidity, temperature, and wind direction. Other scientists measure the thickness of the ice cap and study the shape of the land masses. The Antarctic Treaty. The Antarctic Treaty sets aside the Antarctica as a scientific preserve. It gives only freedom to do scientific investigation and environmental protection. In 1988, the Convention on the Regulation of Antarctic Mineral Resources, CRA-MRA, was adopted. The Madrid Protocol also bans all mining activities in Antarctica. It has designated it as a natural reserve devoted to peace and science. The Antarctic Treaty also prohibits any military activity in Antarctica, including the establishment of military bases and fortifications, military maneuvers, and weapons testing. Indian Antarctic Program. The Indian Antarctic Program is a multidisciplinary, multi-institutional program. It is a part of the control of the National Centre for Antarctic and Ocean Research, Ministry of Earth Sciences, Government of India. It was initiated in the year 1981 with the first Indian expedition to Antarctica. The program gained much global acceptance after India signing the Antarctic Treaty. Subsequent to that, the construction of the Dakshin Gangotri Antarctic Research Base was done in the year 1983. Dakshin, Gangotri and Bharathi. Dakshin Gangotri was set up in 1984. It was buried in ice and had to be abandoned in 1990. It was then superseded by the Maitri base from 1990. Under this program, scientific studies pertaining to the atmospheric, biological, geological, chemical and medical aspects are carried out by India. So far, it has carried out 30 scientific expeditions to the Antarctic as of 14th October 2010. India is currently planning to build an additional research station in the region named Bharathi. Through these, India is all set to join the elite group of 9 countries which have multiple bases in the Antarctica. India has demarcated an area beside Larsman Hill at 69 degrees south and 76 degrees east for its third settlement and second active research station. Antarctica is for global studies. Antarctica is important for science because of its profound effect on the Earth's climate and ocean systems. The Antarctic has a crucial role to play in our understanding of global climate change. Year-round, scientists at Antarctic research bases study the impacts of the pollution caused by humans worldwide on the environment. This beautiful, icy ocean environment is also home to nearly 10,000 highly adapted species, many of which can be found nowhere else on the planet. Currently, only 0.2% of Antarctic waters are strictly protected. Conclusion. The remote, inaccessible and inhospitable Antarctica was the last continent and ocean to be discovered. A lot of scientific discoveries have been made by people from all parts of the world. A report quotes that about 61,000 publications have come in the form of papers and books. The advancement of technology made everything possible today to study the Antarctic Ocean in a detailed manner. It was used for sealing, whaling, and fishing for profit, fun, and adventure. There is a fear that any large-scale mining would harm the precious polar environments of the Antarctica. The Antarctica today has more than 30 year-round scientific stations on the continent and nearby islands. The Antarctic Ocean holds much scientific interest for global research projects due to a number of reasons. The origin of continents, climate change, meteorology and pollution are some of the basic reasons for exploring this vast ocean.